Welcome to the Writing Gym Podcast. We're here to pump up your writing. And now your host, Andi Brixey, personal trainer at the Writing Gym.
Hey there, writers and news daters. This week, the Writing Gym Podcast welcomes Stephen Oliver, Writing Gym alum and author. In this episode, Stephen talks about how to increase your word count, how to overcome not feeling good enough in your writing, and so much more. Hey there, writers and news daters. Welcome to this next episode of the Writing Gym Podcast. Today, our very special guest is Writing Gym and Retreat alum, Stephen Oliver. Thank you so much for joining us today, Stephen.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. So, Stephen, why don't we start by you telling me about your current work in progress?
Which one? I have several. I have 3 completed books, one of which Annalisa has edited, 2 of which she will be helping me to edit once we found the contract for the first one. And I have another 4 books in progress. 3 anthologies, like the original 3 books, and 1 novel. The thing is that I was working on the novel, and I had a chat a month and a half ago with Annalisa, and she asked me what I was doing, how I was getting on, and I said that the novel was coming along nicely, was now 80-odd thousand words, and I was about halfway through my storyline, which means I've got an epic here. The problem is that an epic is not always the best thing to try and break into the publishing market. But I had mentioned that a couple of stories from 2 of my anthologies, they belong together. They're basically the same characters. And I'd said I was actually starting to make an anthology of stories of those. And it's a pure science fiction. And she said, well, concentrate on that. And maybe we'll get, that will be an easier thing to get into the market, generalized science fiction, rather than fantasy, which is a slightly more niche market. And so, so I've been concentrating on that recently, but it doesn't stop me from doing revision work on my other stuff. Unlike many writers, because I'm on quite a few forums, a lot of writers get really upset when they have to do revision, when they have to edit, when they have to rewrite their stuff. For me, it's one of the greatest pleasures because you get to see what you've done well. You get to correct what you haven't done well. And you generally have well, for me anyway, you have a good old time because you're improving your writing. And after a while, you sit down to do a revision cycle and you go, wow, I am actually getting better. But it's not just me because of me. It's also the fact that Annalisa was, as I like to put it, standing over me with a whip. Because we went through that first book and she told me where I was making mistakes. I'm sure it's the same mistake every other one makes. Too many adverbs, too many adjectives, not enough strong verbs. And she also helped me get rid of my Britishisms because there's a few phrases that I use from time to time, which apparently only a Brit understands. I've actually checked with Australian friends. They don't understand them either. Something very, very English, like talking about something being OTT, over the top.
Oh. That
comes from, I think it was a Saturday children's program where they were talking about people being OTT. So I had to remove that sort of thing, and also the occasional things, like we call it a flat, you call it an apartment. Mm-hmm. And this sort of thing. So, I had to change all that. And I found now while I'm writing, I'm already automatically correcting, or not even correcting. I'm not actually making that mistake in the first place. Yeah. So instead of saying, I think it's a bad idea, he said grimly, I would now say, it's a bad idea, he said with a grim smile on his face. Mm-hmm. And so on. A bit more show, a bit less tell. And the thing is, adjectives and adverbs are often very much tell words rather than show words. And so I've been doing that. I worked out recently that since I started writing, I've done about 720,000 words. That's an average of about 110,000 words a year.
That's amazing.
Which is a whole novel.
Easily a whole novel.
Yeah. I've got a spreadsheet where I keep an eye on things. But the thing is, over that time, I've only, because I've done revision work, I've been ill. As you know, I had heart surgery and so on, so I couldn't do any real writing. I spent most of my time doing revision and reading and so on. But even that, it still works out at around 300 words a day, which doesn't sound much, but you multiply that by 365 and you're back up at the 100 and odd thousand words. So you're doing very well.
Exactly. I think that that's one thing. There are a few things that you said that I want to go back to, but I'm going to start with that, one of the big things in the writing gym that we emphasize is, just put in the work, get your tush in the chair and do it. Mm. And for a lot of writers, that's such a hurdle to get over because, we're always so good at making excuses as to why we can't do something, oh, the laundry needs done, or the kitchen needs cleaning. Oh, I need to run these errands. I need to do this. I need to do that. And the reality of the situation is all those things will be there. All you have to do is write and get that done first. And I also loved when you were talking earlier, you were talking about how, you came out with this giant epic fantasy. And Annalisa had that insider knowledge of the industry to say, hey, rather than leading with that, why don't we lead with this, focus on this? Once we get that into the marketplace and you're an established author, then we say, oh, he also has this amazing epic fantasy novel. Would you be interested in that? And having somebody who has that kind of insider knowledge, working with you and helping to develop things with you makes such a difference. And then the third thing you talked about, which is so funny, and it's something that I see happen for alum that, have been through a couple different programs with us or have done the retreat and a program or things like that, that those revision notes that she gives you, those things that she tells you to work on become part of your brain. And as you move forward with your writing, all the things that you learn from the modules in the writing gym, all the things that you learn from the revision period when you're working one-on-one with Annalisa in the writing gym become part of your brain, part of your knowledge, and move you forward in your writing so much faster. Like you said, I no longer use the adverbs and the adjectives like that. I do a lot more show, not tell. And you're actively thinking, oh, I remember that time that Annalisa told me to do this. That's what I'm going to do. So I love seeing that. I love seeing the growth in writers as they move through the programs.
But you saying about, people, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. The thing is that most people don't realize you can do things in little bursts. I wrote a book which I self-published back in 2013, and most of the work on that book was done in small bursts. For instance, I decided I was going to have my lunch break sitting at the desk. So I'd sit down and I'd do a little bit of work on the computer, or everyone else went off for a cigarette break, and I haven't smoked for nearly 35 years. So, they could have that. I'm not going to carry on working if they're having a break. So I sit down. Little things like that, in a paragraph in 10 minutes. Okay, I can type fairly fast. My experience when I'm doing, for instance, a salon is that I can get 500 to 600 words written in the 20 minutes that Annalisa gives us. So, I can get, 1,500, 1,800. If I really concentrate, I'll probably get 2,000 words an hour. So in 10 minutes, that's 1/6, that's, 300 words. Hey, that's my daily limit in 10 minutes. What about that? If you don't type that fast, okay, you may need 2 or 3. But the whole point is, you don't have to sit down and spend hours on end staring at the screen and not doing anything. Do it as and when you can. And I've been advising other people to do that. I'm part of a writers group. In fact, we published a book last year. Am I allowed to mention it?
Go for it.
It's called Where the Wild Winds Blow, by the Whittlesea Wordsmiths. You can find it on Amazon. So I've got, I think, 4 items in the book. Some people have got more, but it could be anything from what we call a postcard, which is literally a piece of flash fiction that would fit onto a postcard. Like there's a lovely one there, something, I can't believe I've been here a week already, really settling in. The food isn't too bad and the staff really look after you. So I'll write to you next week, courtesy Her Majesty's Prison, Glasgow.
Oh, wow.
Little things like that, or a longer story, like one that I did that's a spoof on Star Trek. So we did it as and when we could. And we're a great little group. I think I'm quite honestly one of the younger ones in the group, but it doesn't stop the imagination. That's another one. People say, I'm too old. I've heard that. And when they say that, I always point them towards Grandma Moses, the painter, who didn't start painting until she was 78 and didn't become famous until she was in her 80s.
Yeah.
So, me in my early 60s, I still got a long way that I can go, and I'm sure a lot of people won't say, oh, he's a boring old whatever.
Well, and what I've discovered through working as the personal trainer and, being the leader in mindset, is that, I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm too this, I'm too whatever, is just another excuse that your brain makes up to protect you from all the scary parts that come when you write a book. There's so many fear aspects involved in this process. It's a terrifying thing to say, I'm going to write a book. It's an even more terrifying thing to finish a book and then go, well, what do I do with it? and for so many people, your brain goes, well, it's a lot easier and a lot less stress and a lot less work if we just don't start. Mm-hmm. So let's make up all these excuses of I'm too old, I'm too, I'm not experienced enough, I don't have this, I don't have that. All these different tactics that your brain uses to say, let's protect ourselves. Let's not do the big scary thing. When in reality, the big difference between people who say, I want to write a book and people who say, I have a published book, is taking the leap, is saying, I'm going to do this. I know it's scary. I know it's going to be difficult. I know I'm going to have to work hard. I know I'm going to have to do things I've never done before, but this story is more important than the excuses that I'm making up. Rather than having this preconceived notion of what a writer is and trying to fit every person who comes into the program into that mold and saying, oh, well, you have to do this and you have to do this. We approach it from a different way where you come into the program and we say, what kind of writer are you? Are you a plotter? Are you a pantser? Are you somewhere in between? Are you something completely different that we've never heard before? How do you work? And then from there, we figure out a way to support you and help you as you go on this journey of, if you're in the VIP, finishing your novel, if you're in the mastermind, editing and revising your novel, or, if you move into novel selling your book, and just finding a way to support you instead of trying to change you. I think that's so wildly important. I think that there's so many programs out there that try to force you into becoming something that you're not. And that's not fair. And like you said, it didn't lead to any productivity for you. You did the thing that they told you to do and you hadn't actually written your book, but you just were done because your brain was like, we're done.
Not really. Even if you're a plotter, you don't know that it's actually going to run that way. On forums in Facebook, I see people saying, I've got exactly the plan how I want to do my story, but my characters keep running away and doing other things. And I think to myself, I think you might be a pantser in the wrong place here. And I've even suggested that to one or two people. But the whole point is, you've got to find it for yourself. Our writing group gave a lecture recently in our library. And I did a lecture on going out and writing, and I could see one or two people sort of sitting there thinking, maybe that's what my problem is. I've been trying to go about this the wrong way. I don't know. Maybe I've encouraged someone. But I talked about pantsing versus plotting and time, which are the two things we've been talking about. And, who knows, some of these people, despite being retired, might actually go out and do something. You don't know. It might be just a little kick that they needed to start.
Yeah. And I feel like, that first step is always the scariest. That first little moment where you say, I'm going to do this, is always the most terrifying. But after that, you figure out a way. You figure out your writing style, whether you have a set time that, there's some writers that have been in the program that wake up at 4 a.m. and they do, 2 hours of writing before starting their day. There's some people that are night owls and they thrive in, in an environment where they work from like 12 p.m. to 2 a.m. Stephen is one of those. And there are some people who pick up little snippets of time throughout their day, like you did. I sat at my desk during lunch and I got some work done. Then I, had 10 minutes on my morning commute that I was able to talk into my iPhone and, get some notes taken there. I went to the gym and spent the entire time, making notes on my phone or talking into my phone and got some work done there. There are all these different ways that you can get the work done. So, if this is something you really want to do, something you're very passionate about, like the writers in our program, you find a way to get it done.
Yeah.
No excuses.
No excuses. If you're going to be a writer, that's the one thing you're going to have to throw away, is having an excuse. You've got the excuse, I don't have the time. Another one that I've heard, and I have thought it myself, am I good enough?
Mm-hmm.
Am I good enough to be accepted like Stephen King? I love Stephen King's short stories. I cannot get on with his long stories. I find there's too much fluff, too much expansion in there, which doesn't really... I'm a minimalist writer, as you may know if you've ever read any of my stuff. I go for minimum descriptions. If I describe his eyes as being pale blue, for instance, there's a reason for it. Mm-hmm. Or if I say that she's a redhead, there's a reason for it. I don't just put it in to get my word count up.
Yeah.
So I was told, actually, when I was studying chemistry way back in the 70s, I was told my problem is I could not see the advantages of quantity over quality. And I still can't 40 years later. Well,
I do
let the imagination. The best graphic system in the world belongs in the head of your reader. Better than anything Hollywood could ever create.
That's fair.
So you give them just enough so they can then go wild.
Yeah. And, especially since you're a science fiction and fantasy writer, as someone who reads science fiction and fantasy, I thrive on, like you said, necessary details. But I want to create the world. I find that it's a lot more interesting than anything that can ever be put in a movie. And mine tend to make me happier than when I watch it in a film. So Stephen, here, I want to ask you one big last question. What would you tell other writers who ask about why they should work with Annalisa?
Well, you've actually covered it in one way. Annalisa doesn't try to force you into a Procrustean bed. She doesn't try to say, you have to write this way. She adapts herself to you and not the other way around. In my case, it was sort of gently nudging me, but I'm sure with other writers, she can be a bit more forceful and say, you really need to do this. Otherwise, I don't know. I don't know what happens with the other writers, but I know that she's, she knows what she's doing. That's the most important thing. That's a story that I've told, I think, on the forum in Facebook about an editor. I came across someone who was an editor, and I sent her some work, and she came back and more or less said, "You're doing it all wrong. your stories in the first person have to be rewritten in the third person. You have to get rid of this scene. It's too gory, and so on. And it cost me a lot of money. And quite honestly, most of the things I was sitting there scratching my head. I'm thinking, I don't understand. It was only later I found out she was actually a specialist in non-fiction editing, and she was trying to break into the fiction editing market, and I was a guinea pig. I got to Annalisa, and she said, "I love the way some of your stories are first person. In fact, the gory scene I made even bloodier." Talking about about a demon ripping the viscera out of a man, and and gutting him and eating one of his lungs and all this sort of thing. That really hit them where it hurts, so to speak. So they then realised just how nasty who the man is who sent the demon out in the first place to kill these people. So you already have an idea of the baddie as a person before you even hear about his existence. But the point is that she said, gee, let me do my thing, just gently pointed. I mean, the biggest change was in one story I had a rape scene and she said get rid of it, so I rewrote that, got something that's actually even more powerful because it actually shows even stronger the effect of the man's obsessions, and it is still, in a metaphorical way, a rape, because he is controlling her, but not the same way. And that's the subtlety. And she made me write an extra story. I had what I called a devil's dozen of stories, and it's 13. Now I've got 14, unfortunately, because she made me write an extra one, which is a segue between two other stories, because the stories overall form a single arc.
Yeah, I mean, for our listeners, it's the program itself, the opportunity to work with Annalisa means that, just like Stephen said, and just like I spoke about, being your own writer, but having someone who has the knowledge of the industry standards, having someone who has done this a million times before and can help you no matter what the hurdles are, no matter what you have to work through. And having that advantage, when you get to the point where you're publishing, having that person who not only knows industry standards, but has the connections in the industry. Having the ability to have her go talk to agents, to publishers, to editors, to people on your behalf makes such a difference when you make that leap from I finished this story to what do I do with it. So I know that that's something very exciting that Stephen gets to look forward to, and hopefully something that our listeners will get to look forward to if they join our program. Stephen, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and speaking with us today. I really appreciate it.
Can I just add one last little thing?
Of course,
about
please.
The retreat.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Because it's great working with Annalisa. You work with an hour here, an hour there, or you're doing a salon that's a couple of hours. But you go on a retreat and you've got Annalisa all day. And you're with other writers. So you not only get the encouragement from her working with you on a longer basis and triggering your creativity in various wonderful ways, but you also get to work with other writers and you encourage each other. There's a couple of the writers from last year's retreat I'm still in contact with, where we still exchange messages and still talk to each other and so on. Plus, of course, Knapp House has some of the best food I've ever eaten.
Our listeners will hopefully also get to hear, I actually got to interview Michelle from the Manor Home. I did. I spoke with her a couple of weeks back. We're going to release that episode. I'm not sure when, so listeners keep an eye out for it. And she talked about, the retreat experience from her end and the house and the food and everything else. So, when Stephen says that the house is beautiful and the location is beautiful and the food is amazing, he's not joking, people. If you have the opportunity to get on the England retreat, absolutely do it. And I'm hoping that we'll get some other locations going in the next time. Maybe branch out and do something new too. But thank you, Stephen.
Available. I think there's still one slot available.
There is one slot available. So make sure that if you haven't read up on England Retreat, do so and give Annalisa a call and talk about where she can help you with your writing. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us today. And we will talk soon.
My pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. And for anyone who's sort of sitting on the fence, get off the fence, start writing, talk to Annalisa, and who knows, maybe you and I will be sitting next to each other at a book signing.
I love that. Thank you, Stephen.
If you like what you heard and are interested to see if you're the right fit for the Writing Gym, here's what to do next. Head to www.datewiththemuse.com/publish now and book an appointment to speak with our team. Here's how it works. We'll get on the phone for about 45 minutes and we'll get crystal clear on 3 things. The best way for you to publish, the best way to achieve your publishing dream, and the exact strategy you should be using to reach your publishing goals. Remember, publishing a book well doesn't happen on its own. You need expert guidance to make it happen. We've helped writers all over the world to finish, publish, and sell their novels well, all while sharing their unique story and making the world a better place along the way. To see if we can help you to do the same, head to www.datewiththemuse.com/publish now. I'm Andi, personal trainer over in the Writing Gym, and we'll talk soon. Happy writing! Thank you so much for listening to the whole episode. And here's a little treat for sticking with us. Annalisa was a competitive gymnast and diver in her younger years. Enjoy and happy writing.